What if the 9 beatitudes were never 9 disconnected blessings, but 9 stages of one extraordinary spiritual journey? In the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus repeatedly opens these teachings with an Aramaic expression connected with blessedness and flourishing, TOOBA, and each time the condition changes from emptiness to mourning, from meekness to mercy, from purity to peace, until the final blessing reaches those who remain spiritually anchored even under rejection. That pattern suggests something far deeper than material abundance, an abundance that begins by transforming the person who receives it. Stay with me through all 9 frequencies, because the 9th reveals why true abundance cannot be taken away by circumstances, opposition, or the approval of others. And once you see how all 9 connect, the Beatitudes may never sound the same again. Jesus lived in a multilingual world. Hebrew carried sacred importance. Greek circulated widely across the Eastern Roman world, and yet Aramaic was the everyday language deeply rooted in the land, family life, conversation, and the world in which many of his teachings were first heard. It was within this Semitic linguistic world that Jesus taught about healing, faith, forgiveness, divine authority, and the kingdom of God. That matters because translation can preserve meaning while still losing shades of meaning. In the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 5, Jesus climbs the mountain and begins what we now call the Beatitudes. Again and again comes the declaration translated into English as blessed. In the Aramaic tradition, TOOBA carries the sense of blessedness, goodness, flourishing, and a deeply fortunate condition of life. But for this journey, we will go one step further. We will use frequency as a spiritual metaphor for 9 inner conditions revealed through these Beatitudes, not as the literal dictionary definition of TOOBA, but as a way of understanding their progressive pattern. You are about to encounter receptivity, inner restoration, mastered power, mercy, inner clarity, wholeness, spiritual stability, and finally, a joy that circumstances cannot control. Think of them as 9 doors. Each opens into the next, and together they reveal an ancient vision of abundance that begins not with what enters your hands, but with what happens inside your heart. Before we enter the first frequency, remember this. Shortly, I will guide you through a short prayer designed to help you bring this teaching from ancient words into a personal moment with God. The first frequency begins with one of the most surprising statements in the Sermon on the Mount. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Through the lens we are exploring, the first TOOBA becomes the frequency of receptivity, the condition of becoming inwardly available to God. This is not a celebration of material poverty, weakness, or self-rejection. The paradox is deeper. A person who believes they already possess every answer has little room to receive anything new. Pride closes the vessel. Humility opens it. The first movement toward abundance, therefore, begins with space. Imagine a cup filled completely with yesterday's water. Nothing fresh can enter until something is released. In the same way, fear, rigid expectations, wounded identity, and the constant need to control outcomes can occupy the inner life so completely that we become unable to recognize another possibility. This is why the journey begins here rather than with possessions. Before mercy, clarity, peace, or spiritual stability can mature, there must first be openness. TOOBA introduces the paradox. What appears empty may actually be ready to receive. And this first frequency prepares us for something even more difficult, because once the heart becomes open, it may finally feel what it has spent years avoiding. That brings us to the second frequency, the hidden transformative power within mourning. IFU. Feel this is your moment of transformation. Our Aramaic wisdom guide is waiting for you in the first pinned comment to guide you on your journey. And the best is yet to come. In the next chapters, you'll discover what could change everything for you. The second TOOBA takes us from receptivity into inner restoration. Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. After the heart becomes open, Jesus leads us directly toward what that heart has been carrying. God, as I remember TOOBA, let your blessedness meet me in the places I have tried to hide. I release the grief, disappointments, and memories I can no longer change. Where loss has hardened me, restore tenderness. Where fear has closed me, restore trust. where yesterday still controls today. Give me courage to release it. May your presence enter every empty place. And may what has wounded me become a doorway toward wisdom, compassion, and renewed life. Amen. This second frequency reveals something essential. Mourning is not presented as the destination. Jesus connects mourning with comfort. The wound is acknowledged, but it does not receive the final word. This makes the beatitude radically different from pretending pain does not exist or forcing ourselves to appear spiritually strong. Inner restoration begins when what has been buried can finally be faced without allowing it to define our future. Grief can expose attachments, shattered expectations, broken relationships, and versions of ourselves that no longer exist. Yet, precisely there, another capacity can emerge. The ability to receive comfort and continue forward without denying what happened. And notice the progression. The first, TOOBA, emptied the vessel through receptivity. The second allows accumulated sorrow to move through that newly opened space. But restoration alone is not enough. Once the heart has released what weakened it, it must learn how to carry strength without becoming controlled by strength. That is where the third frequency begins. And it completely changes what most people think Jesus meant when he called the meek blessed. The fourth TOOBA moves from controlled strength into divine alignment. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they shall be filled. Jesus chooses the language of hunger and thirst because these are not casual desires. They are forces powerful enough to redirect attention, choices, and ultimately the course of a human life. Here abundance takes another surprising turn. The teaching does not begin with hunger for possessions, recognition, or control. The hunger is for righteousness, for what is right, true, and aligned with God. In this spiritual reading, the fourth frequency asks a penetrating question. What are you actually training your heart to desire? Whatever continually occupies our deepest desire gradually influences what we notice and pursue. If the heart constantly hungers for approval, it can become imprisoned by other people's opinions. If it hungers only for accumulation, enough may never feel like enough. But when the deepest hunger becomes alignment with divine order, priorities begin changing from within. This is why Jesus connects hunger with being filled. The promise follows the direction of the desire. Receptivity opened the vessel. Restoration released buried pain. Mastered power brought strength under direction, and now divine alignment gives that strength somewhere worthy to go. The fourth TOOBA therefore expands our definition of abundance once again. Abundance is not simply having more available to us. It is becoming less divided within ourselves, so that desire, intention, and action increasingly move in the same direction. And once the heart begins seeking what is right, the next test appears immediately. How will that transformed heart treat the people who have failed it? That question opens the fifth frequency. Mercy. The fifth TOOBA declares, "Blessed are the merciful, for they shall receive mercy." Now the journey turns outward. Everything developed internally begins affecting relationships, because spiritual abundance that never changes how we treat another human being remains incomplete. Mercy. Release is not pretending that harm never occurred, nor does mercy require returning to unsafe situations or removing wise boundaries. Instead, this frequency confronts the inner burden created when resentment, judgment, and the desire for repayment continue occupying emotional space long after an event has passed. Consider how expensive resentment can become. Someone may have wounded you years ago, yet the event can continue collecting interest inside your thoughts. The conversation is replayed, the injustice rehearsed, and the past repeatedly receives energy from the present. Mercy interrupts that cycle without requiring us to call wrongdoing good. This is where the fifth TOOBA connects powerfully with abundance. A heart consumed by old accounts has less room for new relationships, new possibilities, and new peace. Release does not rewrite history. It changes the authority. History is permitted to exercise over today. The progression is becoming clearer. Receptivity opened the heart. Restoration allowed grief to move. Mastered power disciplined strength. Divine alignment redirected desire. Now mercy prevents yesterday's wounds from governing tomorrow's choices. But Jesus is preparing the listener for something even deeper. Once resentment begins losing its grip, the heart can become less divided, less clouded, and more capable of seeing clearly. The sixth frequency will therefore move beyond release into one of the most mysterious promises in the beatitudes. The pure in heart shall see God. Join the hundreds of students already practicing the original Aramaic through our study guides. The link is in the first pinned comment. The sixth TOOBA brings us to inner clarity. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. At first, purity may sound like a demand for moral perfection, but within the progression of the Beatitudes, Jesus has already taken the listener through openness, grief, disciplined strength, righteous desire, and mercy. Something has been progressively cleared away. A pure heart can therefore be understood as an undivided heart, one that is no longer being pulled in opposing directions by resentment, fear, hidden motives, and endless dependence on approval. When the inner world becomes less divided, perception changes. What was previously obscured by emotional noise can become easier to recognize. This gives the promise, they shall see God, extraordinary depth. Jesus is not simply describing physical sight. The teaching points towards spiritual perception, recognizing God's presence, direction, and values with greater clarity. The sixth frequency of TOOBA suggests that some things cannot be perceived clearly, while the heart remains crowded with competing loyalties, and this has a direct connection to abundance. Not every opportunity is a blessing. Not every open door deserves to be entered, and not everything that increases possessions increases life. Inner clarity allows a person to distinguish between what merely attracts and what genuinely aligns. The journey has now crossed an important threshold. The first 5 frequencies transformed what was happening within us. The sixth changes how we see, but clearer sight creates responsibility. Once you begin recognizing what produces division, you must decide whether you will merely avoid conflict or become someone capable of restoring peace. That is why the seventh TOOBA moves from inner clarity into something active and courageous, wholeness through peacemaking. The seventh TOOBA declares, "Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called children of God." Notice that Jesus does not simply bless those who enjoy peaceful circumstances. He speaks of peacemakers, people who actively carry reconciliation into places where relationships, communities, and hearts have become divided. This distinction changes everything. Peace is not passivity, silence, at any cost, or pretending disagreement does not exist. The peacemaker must sometimes enter precisely where tension exists and refuse to multiply it. In this seventh frequency, abundance becomes wholeness, the ability to create greater unity rather than contributing more fragmentation. There is also an important Aramaic connection here. The Semitic world behind the teaching carries a rich understanding of peace as more than the absence of conflict. The familiar Aramaic idea of shlama points toward peace, completeness, and well-being. In that cultural landscape, peace could communicate something being brought toward wholeness rather than simply becoming quiet. Now look at the progression TOOBA has created. The heart first became receptive, then passed through restoration, learned to govern its power, redirected its hunger, released resentment, and gained clarity. Only then does Jesus send that transformed person back into the world as a maker of peace. But there is a final test approaching. What happens when you carry peace and still encounter opposition? What happens when you choose alignment and it costs you acceptance? The eighth frequency answers that question. It reveals a form of abundance that cannot depend upon comfortable circumstances, because Jesus now turns toward those who remain aligned even when righteousness brings resistance. The next TOOBA is spiritual stability, and it prepares us for the ninth and final frequency, where external rejection can no longer determine the condition within. I'll close with chapters 9 and 10. Chapter 9 reveals the final 2 movements of the Beatitudes. Willis chapter 10 turned the 9 frequencies into a practical, daily transformation protocol without repeating the prayer from chapter 3. The 8th TOOBA reveals spiritual stability. Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. The journey now reaches its most demanding territory. Jesus describes a person whose inner alignment has become strong enough to survive external resistance without surrendering what is true. This is abundance under pressure. It is easy to feel aligned when everyone approves of your choices, but spiritual stability is revealed when doing what is right costs comfort, recognition, or acceptance. The eighth frequency does not glorify suffering or encourage people to seek persecution. It reveals something more profound. Opposition does not have to become the ruler of your inner condition. Then Jesus intensifies the teaching. The ninth TOOBA speaks directly to those who are insulted, rejected, and falsely accused because of their faithfulness to Him, and He tells them to rejoice. Here we reach joy beyond circumstance, the final frequency and the culmination of everything that came before. This joy is not pretending rejection feels pleasant. It is freedom from allowing rejection to determine identity. The person who has traveled through all 9 frequencies no longer needs circumstances to continually confirm their worth. Their center has moved somewhere deeper, and now the hidden architecture becomes visible. The journey began with emptiness, the poor in spirit, and ends with an inner abundance that opposition cannot steal. Receptivity became restoration. Restoration became mastered power. Power found alignment. Alignment produced mercy. Mercy cleared perception. Clarity created peace. Peace matured into stability, and stability opened into enduring joy. The 9 TOOBA teachings have formed one continuous path. Now comes the question that matters most. How do you begin living this pattern tomorrow morning? The transformation protocol begins by refusing to treat TOOBA as a magical formula. The power of this practice is not mechanical repetition, but remembering the 9 conditions Jesus called blessed, and allowing one of them to shape a concrete decision each day. Each morning speak TOOBA. Slowly, 9 times. With each repetition, remember the progression you have discovered. Receptivity, restoration, mastered power, divine alignment, mercy, inner clarity, wholeness, spiritual stability, and joy beyond circumstance. Do not rush. Let each repetition become a moment of examination rather than merely another spoken sound. Then choose the frequency your life needs most that day and connect it with one action. If resentment is dominating you, practice mercy without abandoning healthy boundaries. If confusion surrounds a decision, seek clarity before acting. If fear of criticism is controlling you, practice stability by doing what is right without making approval your reward. At night, return to TOOBA once more and ask yourself where that frequency appeared during your day. This transforms the practice from repetition into awareness, and awareness into action. Over time, the beatitudes become more than words heard on a mountain 2,000 years ago. They become a pattern through which daily choices can be examined. True abundance in this teaching is therefore larger than possession. It is becoming receptive without being empty of purpose, powerful without becoming controlling, merciful without losing wisdom, peaceful without becoming passive, and joyful without requiring perfect circumstances. Just a quick reminder, the transformation guides for a fuller life are waiting for you right there in the comments. Before you leave, if this message touched your heart or brought new understanding into your life, write the word TOOBA in the comments below. Your testimony may encourage someone else who is seeking healing and renewal. Thank you for sharing this moment of ancient wisdom with us. Until the next revelation, walk in peace, walk in freedom, and walk in the power of TOOBA blessedness. We are just scratching the surface of this ancient power. Get ready, because in our next video, I will reveal even deeper Aramaic codes that unlock spiritual authority you've never imagined. Make sure you are subscribed and have notifications turned on so you don't miss this unfolding revelation.